Today I want to talk about collecting tarot decks, and I want to go ahead and get one preamble out of the way. Yes, you can be a tarot reader and only own one tarot deck. If you were lucky enough to make a slam dunk when you picked out your first tarot deck and it's the only tarot deck you need and you read with it for decades, guess what? I'm jealous because that was not my experience. But you would be in good company. There are a lot of professional readers who bought one tarot deck and that's the deck that they read with and have read with for decades. So don't worry about it if you don't own a lot of decks. You don't need to own a lot of decks. But I am a collector. I don't just collect things, I collect collections as well. And what this usually turns into is a big pile of crap that I can't actually take care of because I have too much stuff and it's completely disorganized. But that was never what happened with my tarot collection. I've got more down here. I have only been collecting tarot cards for the past 10 years maybe, and I've always just really enjoyed seeing artists' different interpretations of the archetypes on the cards, and I like displaying them in my home. So I have always had good organization in terms of this one collection, my tarot collection. And I like to have some that are up on the shelves, have some cards that are displayed. I also have some down here in these cabinets, and it just makes me feel good. It's something I like to have. It's something I enjoy having and doing. So a question I often get about my tarot collection is, do you read with all of them? And the answer is no. I've purchased them or been gifted them and kept them for different reasons. One of the reasons I might buy a tarot deck, especially early on, I would buy tarot decks if I thought they would help me learn tarot. So a good example of this is the Whimsical Tarot, which is a tarot deck where all of the cards are assigned a different fairy tale or nursery rhyme. And early on in my tarot study, I was having a difficult time remembering who the different archetypes were because they feel so distant from my current lived experience, I guess. And so I bought the Whimsical Tarot because I thought if I read with a deck that had characters that I already recognized, it would help me learn those archetypes, and then I could apply that understanding to other decks as well. A lot of pop culture decks can also be helpful in this way, and it's one of the reasons I really enjoy collecting pop culture decks. For example, I've got some cards back here from the Buffy the Vampire Slayer tarot deck. It's a really good deck. I really love the way they've done the different characters that they've assigned to tarot cards. The artwork is very cool, and it's just, if you are already really familiar with the show, then it's like it removes a barrier of interpretation, that you don't have to think it like, okay, who is the Hierophant and what does the High Priest do? You can just remember that scene or that scenario and apply it to whatever your question was. And so owning certain decks where I kind of already understood who the characters were helped me in my tarot study, and I still can kind of apply those understandings of the archetypes in my reading today. I also have some decks I don't really read with often that I bought because they are a different system, like the Thoth system, and I just felt like learning a little bit about that system would help me in my tarot study in general. So it's a deck that I like, and I will still pull it out and study it and that kind of thing, but it's not one of the ones that I read with on a regular basis. I also have a few decks that I bought at museum gift shops, and I keep them out of sentimentality because they're souvenirs. And they also might not be something I am excited to read with all the time, but I will often pull them out and flip through them and look at them and kind of sort them and that kind of thing. And so for those, I might not read with them all the time, but I keep them as souvenirs, like you might a book that you got in the gift shop for a museum or a postcard or something like that. A couple other decks that I keep just for sentimental reasons. I bought them because they were the tarot decks somebody I knew owned, and that person passed away, and so I wanted to have a copy of the same deck they had because it made me feel connected to them. And that's another deck that I might pull out and flip through and sort through and look at the images, maybe even study occasionally, but it's not something I read with on a regular basis. And then I have a few that I bought because they were created by independent artists and I really loved their art style and I wanted to support them. And now I have 78 little works of art by somebody who, made a deck 10 years ago and put it on Kickstarter, and now that deck's out of print. And I really like keeping those decks as well. It might not be something I read with regularly, but it's something I love to have in my collection that I can take out and read with. Just, I don't know, maybe based on what kind of reading I'm doing or what the question is, or what my mood is, or what the season is, that kind of thing. That said, I've kind of figured out what I like and what works for me. And so I don't actually buy decks very often anymore because I can kind of look through them and tell, oh, well, this is gorgeous, but it's really similar to something I already own. And I'm not trying to become a tarot library. I don't want to steward a giant tarot collection in that way, like I'm, an archivist. There's some people on YouTube where their content is very much like getting decks, reviewing decks, showing off the deck, comparing it to other decks that you might already know about. And so for their content and for what they love to do, owning a bunch of new decks every year is important to part of that process. And the content they make, buying or acquiring, however they get them, all of those decks, is actually really useful to other people who are searching for decks on YouTube. But that's not really what my collection is. That's not what I'm trying to do. So at this point, I'm really not purchasing decks very often unless it's something that looks really different that I don't already have, or maybe it's a pop culture deck for a show I love that, that I haven't seen a deck like it before or something like that. So although I definitely have more than I need, I'm not trying to acquire as many tarot decks as I can get my hands on. And I never really have bought tarot decks in that way before. And I think I've kind of figured out how to work with what I have at this point. So even though it's fun to look at decks, I definitely don't buy as many as I see and think are interesting. I still will purchase one every once in a while, but it's pretty rare. In talking about collecting, I think it's also an opportunity to talk about consumerism, which is a really important conversation we need to continue to have, especially where, we're on the internet or we're on social media talking about things, and there is such a push to have the newest thing or the next thing and make content about it before everybody else gets the opportunity to do so. One of the reasons I prefer YouTube is because since it is long form content and there seems to be kind of a longer lifespan for videos on YouTube than short form videos on other platforms, there doesn't seem to be the same push to get your hands on the newest thing and make sure to say something about it before anybody else can, and that kind of stuff. The height of my tarot purchasing was definitely when I was on Tumblr back in the day, because people on Tumblr were really good at making anything really look aesthetically pleasing and like it was something that you had to have. And I feel like there was a lot of fear of FOMO. I think there was a lot of FOMO in the tarot community on Tumblr, that like if you didn't get the thing that everybody else was pre-ordering, then you were missing out in some way, or you were gonna get left behind. And I just don't really feel that kind of push or pressure to continue to buy things the way I did when I was on Tumblr. And I'm sure that TikTok is probably the current version of that. I'm not really on TikTok anymore, so I haven't spent any time in the tarot TikTok community, but I'm betting if it's anything like beauty influencers or anything else in short form content, it is trying to go viral. So since I've kind of gotten off of different social media tarot communities, I haven't really felt the same drive to buy every single tarot deck that comes out, or even keep an eye out for new decks. But like I said, there are people on YouTube who do that and do that very well. And so I kind of don't feel like I have to, because I can go to those people and watch what they're doing and kind of decide from there. So, you know, it's not for everybody. Like I said at the beginning of the video, you know, you don't have to own a bunch of decks, and you don't have to be a collector or an archivist or anything like that in order to be a legitimate reader. It's just kind of what works best for you, or what are you most interested in. But I do think it's important to continue having conversations about overconsumption and consumerism in every community, including the tarot community. As far as specific decks go, years ago, Moon Baby made a little list of prompts for tarot collectors to answer in YouTube videos, and I started doing that on an old channel and then just kind of abandoned it. But I did re-upload those old videos onto here. If you'd like to see me continue to finish that prompt list and make some more videos answering those prompts about my tarot collection, just leave me a comment down below and I'll start working on those for you. Do you collect decks? Do you have a certain kind of deck that you like to collect? Are you into oracle cards more than tarot? I have some oracle decks, but I never really got into it as much as tarot. So if you have some recommendations, leave those below. I'd love to see them. In the meantime, be excellent to each other, and I will talk to you next time. Party on, dudes.